This is Screencast, chapters 1, 2, and 3, part 10. Hopefully this will be the last one. Okay, we've been talking about themes and purposes in art, and we just talked about religion. Now we're going to talk about pride and politics. Prideful and political theme has been a very popular theme throughout the history of art. We can look at things like the pyramids, very prideful and political. This is don't forget me, remember me for all of time. Augusta Suprema Porta, we already talked about that kind of political, prideful thing. Prideful a lot of times because of the time in which it was made, wanting that ideal, making them look better than what they really did. Even the little cherub-looking figure down there next to his leg was because he said that he was descended from gods. This is what we normally think of when we think of political art, that political cartoon kind of thing. One of the things that I want to throw out to you that I think you should know about political art is we always have a tendency to feel like political art is the view of the artist. Not always. Sometimes the artist is being commissioned to do this particular idea or concept. So just remember that it's not always necessarily the artist's vision of their political view. Now, art is a mirror of everyday life. This is a type of art that depicts the little moments of everyday life and its surroundings. We also call it genre art. So this is a good example of the Limburg brothers. Page 379, figure 1616 in your text. The Limburg brothers were illustrators that illustrated basic peasantry life at the particular time in which they were alive. Now, this is George Caleb Bingham, and you can find this on page 482, figure 2110 in your text. And George Caleb Bingham and Renoir were alive at the same time, and they were doing basic commentary. Renoir was basic commentary of social life. But George Caleb Bingham was interested in the frontier, so that was the genre in which he chose to create, the frontier and then social life. Now, art and nature is another popular thing, extremely popular theme in art when we're dealing with things like landscape art. Now, Paul Cézanne was a painter. You can find this, an image of the landscape that's very similar to this one on page 480, figure 21-9 in your text. The interesting thing about Cézanne is that he doesn't get a lot of credit in people knowing that, when we learn how to draw, a lot of times we think of things in shapes. Like I said before, a house is a square and a triangle. Well, he's the one who came up with the basic idea of things are a shape and then you can draw them. Georgia O'Keeffe is another person in this category of the landscape type art, but she did florals, and she did florals that were to the extreme close-up that you couldn't really tell what they were, so almost abstracting them. Now, imagination and fantasy, of course, is another popular subject matter. This is very popular today, but it hasn't always been popular because if you did some of these type of imagery, let's say in the 1400s, people would have thought that there was something wrong with you. Maybe demons were possessing you or influencing you in some certain way. So this was about as wild as it would have gotten back in the day. Today we have people in this category like Salvador Dali. Dali is another one of those names like the Picasso and the Van Gogh. His art is identified as what we call the art of the unconscious. Surrealism, so dreamlike imagery. This is one of Salvador Dali's most famous pieces called Persistence of Memory. You've probably seen this with the melting clocks. You can find this image on page 494, figure 2123 in your text. Now, birth and marriage, sorry if the image is a little gross, but birth and marriage is, of course, again, a popular subject matter, and it hasn't always been a popular subject matter with men. I mean, if you think about it, I am 47 years old, and when I was born 47 years ago, It was just the start of when men were starting to be allowed into the labor and delivery room. So before then, they weren't really in there. So this was really kind of a woman's kind of subject matter as far as birth. So again, sorry for that being kind of gruesome there. Now, the birth of Venus was painted by a male, Sandro Botticelli. He was thought to have been commissioned by the Medici family in Florence. Now, the Medici family, you'll hear about them again, because the Medici family were very strong in the influence of the arts. We think about the Renaissance and the boom of the art of the Renaissance, the Michelangelo, the Van Goghs, the Michelangelo, the Da Vinci, the Ninja Turtles, okay, Raphael. Those all came from that time of the Renaissance, and the Medici family were very influential in commissioning and purchasing, and they even had an art school in their home. So Sandro Botticelli created this image, the birth of Venus. So if you've never heard of the Venus on a half shell, what this is Venus is the goddess of love, and she was created from the her birth, in her creation was from the Cronus, the god of time, castrated his father and threw his genitals into the sea, and from the foam of the splash, the birth of Venus occurred. So here we see an interpretation of birth by a man, but not necessarily the actual birthing and delivering process. Thought I'd throw this in there because I kind of grossed you out on that first slide on this subject matter, but kind of funny. I myself, one of my kids was a preemie, and the doctor called her a peanut, so I just kind of think this one's image is kind of funny. Now, marriage, it of course is a popular subject matter for all times and cultures. The Arnolfini wedding, of course, being an example of a wedding. But when we think about it, it's not just, you know, paintings and drawings. So what about jewelry and things like that? That definitely is a symbol. Rings are a symbol of marriage. So that definitely qualifies into that subject matter. Now, death I always think of as, like landscape art, extremely popular. Death can be portrayed in many different ways. It can be as gruesome as this Goya painting, or it can be as wonderfully illustrated as this Frank Frazetta death dealer image. So, you know, death can be portrayed, again, like the pride in politics. You know, the pyramids were where you were buried, right? So this is, of course, pride, politics, and death. Sarcophagus, death. The Vietnam Memorial, death. We're looking at a large black granite V that has been cut into a hillside, and on the black granite are all the names of those who lost their life during the Vietnam War. And then here we see, and this is going to be our last slide, this is the AIDS quilt. So this is the last time that the AIDS quilt was all together in 1994. It is about 52,000 panels there. It's spread out over miles. And each one of those little colored blocks is a quilt that has been made for someone who has died of AIDS. And I don't know if it getting together like this again because of its massive size, but it does, parts of it do travel around the country, and every now and then SIU has it, but they're also coming by and picking up new pieces. So this is the end of the sections chapter 1, 2, and 3. I will also be putting up the PowerPoint, so that way you can jump in and get to those actual video links that I was telling you about to take a look at. And your first quiz is going to be from text material, not necessarily from this PowerPoint material. So make sure you're reading in the text, chapters 1, 2, and 3. Because it is such a long section, all the other sections are not going to be this long. I just want you to know this particular first chapters 1, 2, and 3 are really long. I'm giving you extra time on that first quiz, so make sure you look. It'll probably open up earlier, and I'll give you a longer period of time for you to actually take it. So you do have a deadline on taking that. So make sure you're looking at that. And then you will also have exam 1 that will be 25 multiple choice questions, pretty much covering what you've seen in this PowerPoint and in those video links. So make sure you're looking at that. And again, I usually tell my students when I have them all together, and I'm not seeing you guys, but I want you to know that your lowest exam score will be dropped. So that can even be your final exam score. So you will have 5 exams and then your final. So just know that if one of them doesn't turn out so great, don't panic. You're going to have your lowest one dropped, okay? If you ever have any questions, make sure you go ahead and email me. If there's technical difficulties, email me. I won't know unless you guys let me know. Okay, thank you. Bye.